Hello, friends. George Kors here, and today I have a very special guest on for a wonderful interview, an extraordinary poet by the name of Bianca Brown. And I'm really looking forward to sharing this interview with you folks. Bianca, I met through some folks here in DC, is a really talented poet who does poetry and spoken word, a lot of free verse, really, really beautiful stuff. And we talk a lot in this interview about all sorts of stuff, inspiration, advice for young poets, the form, and the history of the poem. We talk about all sorts of stuff here, and I'm really, really excited to share this with you. And if you're out there, if you're a poet out there and you want to have your work highlighted, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can head to georgekors.com and contact me there, and we can arrange an interview. I want to highlight our poets. I want to highlight our novelists and the folks who are working with letters out there in the world. So without further ado, and thank you for watching, here is our interview with Bianca Brown. Hello, friends. We are here today with Bianca Brown, a wonderful poet who I am super excited to have on the channel. Bianca, hello and welcome.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me on, George.
It is so great to have you. I am loving interviewing other writers and thinkers on this channel. And when we met, I was super excited to meet another poet from here in our wonderful city, Washington, D.C. And tell us a little about yourself, Bianca. What's your poetry like? What kind of poems are you writing?
Yes, I would say so. A little bit about me. So I also go by B Speaking, so that's my artist name. And I would say my poetry style is very free verse, very freestyling. Sometimes it's lyrical, and I kind of write how I feel
Mm,
or what experiences make me feel. I also love to write about nostalgic feelings.
mm.
So that is my comfort zone, I would say, with space. But I do play around a lot with poetry. So sometimes I'm technical and I'll pick like, okay, this month let me be technical with my writing, and I'll challenge myself to go places that allow me to do that. And then other times it's very colloquial, it's very how I feel, very off the cuff. So yeah, I feel like I'm a little bit of everything, I would say.
I love that. You mentioned that you kind of orient yourself sometimes towards nostalgia. Can you tell me a little bit how you like in this vast space of the poem, how do you sort of situate yourself as a poet, but also I'm loving this idea of situating yourself towards some of those nostalgic feelings. How do you sort of work that into your works?
Absolutely. So sometimes I'll pick like one phrase or
Mm,
I'll pick like one sentence that really like pulls me in a direction. A lot of times, even if I'm on the road or if I'm just out and about, even cleaning in the house, just around, something will give me a feeling and then I'll just write it down. And
yeah.
so as I go through my list of needing inspiration, I'll see these like one liners and
Yeah.
then I'll say, okay, let me take this and then kind of go with it. And a lot of times it's just how I feel in the moment. Like, for example, I was in the grocery store the other day and it was a man and he bent down to tie his daughter's shoe.
Mm,
And so that to me, it was just like, it made me feel like when I was a kid and I felt protected by
mhm,
my dad.
mm,
So I kind of wrote that down and I just wrote down times with dad,
mm.
right? And then so when I come back and I look at my list and I'm like, this is how that made me feel in the moment, like thinking about how that little girl feels as she's building that connection with her dad right now at 3 or 4 years old. So stuff like that. That's kind of how I'll like go into a direction with a piece.
I love that. Yeah, I'm kind of there too as a writer. Whenever I'm out, I'm always bringing a notebook with me wherever I am, just in case I see something that kind of sticks with me. Whether it's thematically related to what I'm working on or not, I just kind of let
Mhm.
that, be part of my experience of the world. Is sort of letting that be sort of through literature. I love that. Um, and I come at it from a novelist perspective, which is so different. I do some poetry, but not a lot. So what drew you to the form of the poem? Because when I say the form of the poem is vast, I mean it is
Mhm.
like vast, vast. And I'm always curious to see the poets in my life, what brought them to this thing. Because I think that there's this sort of ancient tradition that we take part in as people of letters, to be sure. But the poem is it can be very intimidating. What brought you to that?
I think I feel like I've always been a writer.
Mm,
So even as a kid, I remember when I was able to write and understand, I've always had a journal. So
hmm.
I've always written things down and nobody told me to. I just kind of did.
Sure, sure.
And so I think that it was easy for me to kind of go into that direction because I've always known myself to write. And I think that for me is why it makes it a little easier for me to
Hmm.
write poetry versus maybe writing longer pieces.
Mm,
And so, with that though, that is how I got into spoken word because
mm,
I wanted to challenge myself to write things that were longer than 30 or 40 seconds of a read.
sure,
And so that has made me a better writer, I would say, because now my pieces are 3, 5 minutes long, where you have to do a lot of technical things to keep it going and to stay
sure.
on theme. So I would say, yeah, that's how I got into that aspect of poetry.
It's so funny you mentioned spoken word because like years and years ago when I was a teenager, I went and I saw on a whim Saul Williams,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
who
that's my favorite. He's my
yeah, and
favorite.
it was I remember him reciting from memory, which was
Mhm,
beautiful without a microphone. There were probably like 1,000 people there, maybe,
mhm,
and just really a commanding. I mean, this is what you think of when you think of like the ancient poets, right? Is like this man standing here being really, and he recited from "So Said the Shotgun to the Head," and I was like
mhm.
absolutely life-changing moment. It was just so profound. Speaking of that, I got a little ahead of myself here. Tell me, who are some poets that you admire? Who are you reading?
Yes, so definitely Saul Williams. I love him. He's one of my favorites. I have been going a lot into like spoken word
Mm.
that is on music. So
Oh,
that's another thing that I really like. So I really like this guy. His name is Lordell.
okay.
He's really good. So although he's local, he's from Florida.
Mm,
By way of Atlanta, I believe, but very good. Love his work. So I would say that's kind of been my bag as of late
hmm.
because I am trying to be a better writer in the spoken word space. So I feel like that's a good like crossover.
Sure.
So I've been spending a lot of time with that, and I would say like those building blocks of like I remember like the first piece of poetry that I've ever read was my Angelou. So of
Mm,
course, yeah. So a lot of those historic pieces are so great. I love revolutionary poets in general.
sure.
So, and that same thing because I do feel like it's the whole idea of like speaking in parables and speaking in metaphors and all of that that kind of speaks to the Black experience. And so I really love listening to people who do that, and I also
Mm,
love listening to people who do that present day,
mm,
right, who take that and spin it and make it a little different. And so I kind of try to do that in my work as well and pay homage to that, like to like that ancestral type of writing and
mm.
speaking and stories. So
For
yeah.
sure.
What is that with my spoken word at least?
Yes. Yeah. And I know, one of the things as a writer that is really super fun to navigate, but is also, I think, supremely challenging is this idea of having the freedom to use language and trying to and like capture that experience that we're having as individuals, but also relate it outward. I think that's one of the things that people love about Maya Angelou is just like how intensely relatable you can feel in a lot of those poems. You can really feel the genuine, emotion and the depth of it. It's really important, not only culturally, but just also like as a person who has emotions, right?
Yeah.
Um, which you mentioned a little bit there about like working on and focusing on your language and trying to write some longer pieces, trying to write some spoken word stuff. I want to talk a little bit about workflow here. I'm always curious with poets. What's your workflow like? What does it look like to write a poem? Because as a novelist, I have this different idea that's like so segmented of like, wow, this thing is going to take forever to write. I have to do so much stuff and poets have to do that in a different way. So I'm always curious as to what that sort of looks like for you.
Yes. I would say it's a lot of right to a point, come back, right to a
Mm,
point, come back, right to a point, take out, come back.
sure.
Right. So I feel like it's a lot of back and forth, at least for my process. And then redirection, I would say, is
Mm,
like key. A lot of times you'll start in one direction and then you're like, this poem is not what it
Mm,
started as, right? So now something else. So sometimes if I want to keep it, I'll keep parts of that and then I'll move the other parts to something else and see
sure.
if they can be two different pieces, or maybe that other piece just goes away completely.
Mm,
So I would say it's a loose plan.
yeah,
It's a loose plan for the most part.
sure.
So sometimes you'll have that idea, but I think you just have to be so flexible with
Yeah.
poetry because, again, because you're just in the way that I write, because I am free verse,
Mm,
I do write off of feeling and emotion.
hmm.
So not all the time that emotion will keep me in one place. Sometimes it'll take me somewhere else.
Sure.
So, and then also as a person who struggles with ADHD,
Mm,
I tend to all over the place, and
sure.
that's another reason why I have to have those notes, those lists
Yeah.
to like organize my thought processes. Because as we were speaking, and I was looking through pieces that I would possibly bring up today or like highlight. I have like 300 notes,
Oh,
and maybe like a third of them are complete, maybe.
sure.
Right. So, and it's just a whole bunch of different things where maybe it started here and then went here, or maybe this is done now. And as I look back at it, maybe this is now a complete piece when
Mm,
before I thought it wasn't. So that also, so a lot of times it's just coming back to that piece and being confident in your piece as well. Like sometimes it's like, this is good enough. You can leave it as it is. And because somebody else might look at it and say, yes, this resonates with me and it makes sense.
yeah.
So
God, that editing process is so complicated. I teach writing a lot, and one of the things that my students always ask me is like, how do I know when something's done? And my answer outside of academic writing, my answer is always like, you'll know. It's very
yeah,
mysterious. And it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned just these ideas everywhere because I had this mentor years back who she was primarily a poet, and I was writing this piece with her that was not poetry, and she suggested to me she had me print it out and cut out all the paragraphs and then just shuffle them, and she was like, take a look at it in just some random order and see what you feel
yeah,
about it. And that was such a liberating moment for me because one of the things that draws me to poetry is like, wow, the freedom that this person has with their expression. I think that's why it transcends cultures. We see it all over the world in all languages. We see poetry because it's like so profound just to scribble something down and let that be, let that exist. Um, I love that. I love what you're talking about here, and I can't wait for like 150 of those ideas to be done, and for us to have the
yeah.
collected works. At some point here. I know you've mentioned a few other folks. I know you do like to support some other writers. I know you also use socials. You use Instagram like I do. Um, can you tell me what that work looks like for you? Because I think for me, one of the things that I'm so excited about with being on socials and doing stuff like here on YouTube is trying to give a voice outside of this sort of like corporate, like very specific top five publisher space, and let the seriousness of our art be the seriousness of our art and have a place to document that. Can you tell me what that work looks like a little bit for you, and what kind of excites you about working with other writers?
I think the biggest thing that I love about working with other writers is the freedom to think differently.
Mm,
Because one, um, I think it gives a different scope and view onto how you approach your writing.
mm,
I think you can get great critiques from people who actually take time to write.
sure.
And so I think there's a lot of like learning from each other along the way. And without compromising who you are as a person, like without
Mm,
compromising your style and your artistry. I know some people do struggle with that because
yeah.
they get inspired. Some like I know some writers who don't read any work until
Mm,
after they complete pieces just because of that, because
sure.
it'll start to come into their thought process and their approach to being on stage as well.
Hmm.
So I always love being able to collaborate with artists for the reason of just getting feedback in general, just authentic feedback from people
Hmm.
that I respect and appreciate. And so, and can appreciate the time and effort that you take to put into your craft. because they
Oh yeah.
really understand what that looks like. And it is, in fact, a craft, which some people don't realize, right? It
Yeah.
takes a lot of time, effort
Oh yeah.
to one to be organic and also to be vulnerable. I think poetry is very
Mm,
vulnerable.
yeah.
So yeah, I would say that's a big thing. I also provide, I feel like, that same safe space for artists
Mm,
that come to me and ask for feedback as well, or just to be collaborative about other things. And so yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing I would say
yeah.
about that process.
Yeah. That, I always say when I'm talking about novels and stuff on the channels, like I always love taking my hat off to other writers, and the way I phrase it, which I think translates to a lot of folks who aren't writers, is I
Mm-hmm.
always say game recognizes game. It's like
Yes,
you when you're sitting in a group of
absolutely.
writers and you hear somebody's words or you hear their sentences and you're like, damn, that's good. That is good
Yeah.
stuff. And I really love that moment. Having that moment with other people. It happens so much more frequently than I think a lot of non-writers realize, which is, non-writers, they are interacting maybe with their local bookstore, maybe their library. They're seeing the same writers time and again. They're seeing celebrity writers, and they're maybe not seeing the folks in their neighborhood who really are doing like profound literary work. And
Mm-hmm.
I always love when I go into a bookstore that sells, the self-published people from the neighborhood, or the little micro presses from the neighborhood, because you find just these really astounding and beautiful works. And this brings me to another question. Before I ask
Yeah.
you if you have anything that you want to read, which I'm kind of springing on you if you have anything you want to read, but before we get there, I want to ask you what advice you have for young poets.
Oh yeah.
Because I know I could like sit down with a bunch of young novelists who are all 20 years old and just talk at them about at them, right? About how I think they're so important. But I would love to know what your advice is and what you would say to somebody who's out there with a notebook and maybe trying to, stitch those ideas together into a poem.
I would say trust your intuition,
Mm,
and I would say trust your process and trust your words. I think that not everybody is going to be receptive to what you put out in the world,
yes.
but somebody will.
Yep.
That's the thing. Everybody might not, but somebody will. And maybe that 50 is your audience. You
Sure.
never know. But I would say that's a big thing. And then I know for me, it took me a long time to be confident in what I'm doing on
Hmm.
stage and confident in what I'm writing. So I would tell them to continue to write. That confidence is going to come with time.
Mm,
And also, a lot of times the lack of confidence is just because you don't feel like you're good enough, but you are, right? I feel
hmm.
like everyone who has the courage to do anything that is outside of the norm, anything that's different, is perfect. So
Mm.
that version of you is perfect right now, and it'll get better with time. So I would say those would be my words of encouragement to for my young writers.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
on the verge.
Beautiful. Because, the other thing that is true there about what you're saying is the thing that separates a person who wrote a poem from the rest of the world is that person wrote the poem. There's
Correct.
plenty of people out there who maybe are going to be hyper judgmental of you or dismissive
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
say, "Hey, your poetry sucks, your novel sucks, whatever." But they didn't write their novel. They did not write their book of poems. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole other thing to unpack with that person about that.
Yes.
But they got there. You actually wrote it. I love trusting your intuition about it is such
Mm-hmm.
a big and scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to throw yourself out there. It's and like you said earlier, it's so vulnerable, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to say, "Hey, these are my words. They're deeply personal, whatever that may be." I think that can be really scary. That can be really
Mm-hmm.
scary. Do you have a poem that you want to read for us?
I do. I can read. I will actually read one from my book. So my book, Black Leather.
Oh,
So I'll
lovely.
read one from there. So it'll be just a quick one, but
Okay.
I will read this one. So this one's called Roller Coaster.
Okay.
Twisting and turning on this thrill ride, I'm strapped in, but my reins feel loose. I pre-gamed with Jack Daniels. My premonitions tell me to expect an impact. Now I'm holding my breath, speeding through because I'm impatient. I just want the happy ending, the husband, the house, the dog, the kid, so I'm settling. But the ride seems to be broken.
Mm, beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
I
course.
love just how subtle, how soft that poem is for the heaviness that it brings, right? I think that that's really profound. Thank you so much. Bianca,
Yes, of course.
I want to thank you for coming on. Thank
Yes.
you so much. Do you have anything that you want to plug, anything that you want to say before we get out of here today?
Yes. So just a few things. You can follow me on black_leather. That's where all my poetry is, other pieces, spoken word, all of that. So it's black with two C's _leather.
Okay.
And also, I have a podcast as well where I talk about social issues and the Black experience, and it's called Black Perspective.
Awesome.
So it's Black, BLAC without the K, and then like perspective, right, at the
Love
end.
it.
So, yes.
Excellent. And we will have links to everything down in the description below as well. So you folks can find those there. Bianca, thank you so much again for coming on and reading a poem for us and talking and to our young poets and novelists and writers out there, just write it. I mean, we hate to be so vague, but getting it out there is good. And I also promise that there are other people in the community doing it. Bianca and I met at a friend's birthday party. So, things
Yeah.
happen. You
Yep.
meet writers everywhere.
Very
Shout
true.
out to Jenny for that, by the way. She'll get a little shout out in the video. But thank you so much, Bianca, again. It was really a great pleasure having you. And you know what? Buy Bianca's book. That's going to be down there below as well. And thank you so much again.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Bianca. Hello, everybody, and thank you again for spending some time with myself and Bianca today and talking about her wonderful poetry and her wonderful work. Um, Lots of information about Bianca down below, so you guys can get with her and follow her on Instagram, buy her poems, support her work. Really, really, she's doing fantastic stuff. Listen to her podcast. And to the young poets and novelists and writers out there, I agree with Bianca. Trust your instincts, trust your intuition. If you think you're pushing the form, if you think you're trying something weird and you think it's good, it's probably good. I have said this before on the channel. I'll say it again. I think talent is ubiquitous. I think we find talent, literary talent, genuine, real, substantial literary talent in all of our communities. And I think no matter where you go, you're going to find a beautiful poet and a beautiful novelist and somebody who's doing some really fantastic writing. So trust and believe in yourself and do some good work. And hey, if you're just a lover of literature and you love reading poems, Bianca's work is fantastic and you should check it out. Without a doubt, check out her podcast and work as well. Follow her on Instagram. If you like these videos and you want to see more of these videos, easiest way to do that is support me. You can buy my novel, Always the Wanderer. I've got a new novel coming out called Sing Lazarus that's coming out in June, coming out very soon. Buy my work. That's the easiest way to do it. Buy Bianca's work. Easiest way to support her. Best way to support the writers in your life is to buy and engage with their work. That's what we're here for. So, thank you so much. If you want to find out more about me, you can head to georgekors.com. Like I said, Sing Lazarus is coming out soon, so you guys can head to georgekors.com. Find out more about that via Anxiety Press, and you can follow me on socials I may or may not use at GBK7288. I don't use TikTok anymore. There's stuff on TikTok. I don't use it anymore. Primarily using Instagram right now and YouTube, of course, where you are here. So thank you so much again. And I want to, Bianca, thank you so much for coming on. And we mentioned our friend Jenny, who connected us at a birthday party a while back as fellow writers. Thank you, Jenny, for introducing us. Really productive stuff happening here. And I hope your reading practice is going well. I hope you guys are safe, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you so much. Adios, everybody. See you later.